Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we've got quite a collection of sources in front of us. They really run the gamut. Everything from the physics happening inside an ice cube to some very high-stakes diplomacy over at the UN.
It really is a snapshot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Humanity just seems to be accelerating. You see these incredible tech leaps happening almost daily, it feels like.
Right. But at the same time, we're still stuck in these really old, really deep conflicts. History just keeps grabbing us.
That's exactly the tension. And that's our mission today, really. Synthesis. We want to try and cut through some of that information overload. Look across science, geopolitics, corporate power plays, and just pull out the critical bits.
So if you're feeling swamped by the headlines, hopefully this helps. We want to give you the context, maybe some surprising facts, the underlying patterns, help you understand not just what's happening,
But why it matters right now, why it's defining this moment we're in.
We're covering a lot, groundbreaking science, like literally making electricity by bending ice. We'll get into that. The really immediate diplomatic tensions, Palestine, Ukraine, very serious stuff.
And the big corporate ambitions, too. Fusion energy, regulating TikTok, that constant push and pull between innovation and, societal concerns.
Exactly. So let's dive in. Let's start with some of the almost invisible revolutions happening in labs right now. Okay, section 1, the invisible revolution. And I want to kick off with something that sounds, almost counterintuitive. The shocking power of just ordinary ice.
It does sound like a paradox, doesn't it? But it's a really significant finding in materials science. Researchers have found that plain old ice is actually a flexoelectric material.
Flexoelectric, okay. I know piezoelectric, you squeeze it, you get electricity. How's this different?
Right. Piezoelectric is about compression. Flexoelectricity is about uneven strain. So bending, flexing, that kind of mechanical stress, when you do that to ice, it generates a small amount of electricity.
So it's the actual deformation, the bending itself, not just squeezing.
Precisely. You slightly deform an ice cube, you generate a charge. Now, the amount of electricity is small right now, but the implications could be huge, especially when you think about nature. The main theory now is that this property might be key to understanding lightning formation in storms.
Ah, that actually makes a lot of sense. You've got billions of ice crystals in a storm cloud, right? Crashing into each other, flexing, breaking under all that wind and chaos.
Exactly. All that mechanical stress, all that bending and flexing leads to charge separation on a massive scale. That fuels the lightning. We kind of theorized about the mechanisms before, but this gives it a specific material property explanation.
So, knowing this, what could we do with it beyond understanding storms?
Well, the future vision is about energy harvesting. If researchers can figure out how to optimize this effect, maybe amplify it, you could potentially see ice or similar water-based materials used in tiny sensors or devices, things that could power themselves just by responding to slight environmental stresses.
Like vibrations or tiny pressure changes.
Or even temperature gradients, generating their own power autonomously. It points towards this idea of truly smart, self-sustaining materials. Really fascinating potential.
Staying with water's weirdness, Japanese researchers used a really precise tool, NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance.
Right, NMR techniques. Very powerful.
And they used it to see water in a state that I thought wasn't possible, the pre-melting state.
Yeah, and what's really wild is how it behaves in this state. When you confine water to really, really tiny spaces like nanoscale dimensions, it doesn't just act like a solid or just act like a liquid.
It is both.
It acts like both simultaneously. It still has some of that solid, like crystalline structure, but it also shows the flow and movement you'd expect from a liquid.
It's blurred between phases. How does NMR let them see that?
NMR is crucial because it lets scientists basically track the movement and the environment of individual atoms without messing up the system.
Yeah.
So they could see these subtle water molecule movements within those tiny confined spaces.
Without disturbing that weird pre-melting state itself.
Exactly. And this observation, it really challenges the standard textbook definitions of phase transitions. It could have big implications for things like cryobiology.
Like how water behaves inside cells when they freeze.
Precisely. And also for material science, especially if you're designing materials with tiny pores or channels where water might be confined.
That is genuinely mind-bending physics. Okay, let's bring this incredible science back to a very practical, very large problem. Waste. Specifically, food waste. Researchers have found a way to zap rotting food with electricity, and get energy out.
Yes, and this could be a massive environmental win, tied directly into the whole idea of a circular economy. We produce just mountains of food waste globally, right?
Huge amounts.
And when it just sits in landfills and decomposes, it releases methane, which is a really potent greenhouse gas.
Yeah.
This new process, it's electrochemical. It sort of bypasses that whole polluting decomposition.
How does the electricity work in this process? What's it doing?
Well, by applying electricity in a very targeted way, the researchers can trigger specific chemical reactions. These reactions break down the organic compounds in the rotting food much more efficiently than natural decay.
And what do they break down into?
Into useful things, primarily hydrogen and other biofuels. So instead of waiting years for waste to rot and pollute, you get a relatively quick energy return.
That's incredible, turning waste into fuel using electricity.
And the team doing this research, they're not just thinking about the tech. They're talking about potentially creating a whole new industry around systematically harnessing energy from biological waste, making waste valuable, essentially.
That's progress you can actually, well, measure and maybe even market. Very cool. Hashtag B, medical and environmental health breakthroughs. Okay, let's shift that scientific focus now from energy and materials towards human health. And there's something here that sounds like a genuine game changer for medical imaging, possibly democratizing diagnosis globally.
We're talking about a new type of gamma ray detector based on perovskites. Now, people might know perovskites from solar cell technology. They're crystals that are incredibly efficient converting sunlight.
Right. Huge in solar recently.
Well, now they're proving revolutionary for medical imaging, too. Essentially, it allows for a much better crystal camera for nuclear medicine.
Better how? What makes this perovskite detector superior to what we use now?
Several things. Significantly sharper images, which means better detail for diagnosis. Faster imaging, which is better for patients and workflow. Safer, potentially requiring lower radiation doses. And, critically, cheaper to manufacture.
Chapter is huge.
It's huge. Traditional detectors often need really bulky, expensive components.
Yeah.
Perovskites allow for thinner, more efficient detectors. That improved resolution is vital for things like spotting cancer early or staging it accurately.
Cost factor means?
It means the potential to bring high-quality diagnostics to parts of the world that currently can't afford it. Underserved regions, places struggling with resources. This could genuinely improve health equity on a global scale. A massive leap forward.
Truly is. Okay, now for something that affects millions daily, allergies. There's some fascinating research on using a specific type of UV light as a non-drug defense.
Yes. This comes from the University of Colorado Boulder. They looked at a specific wavelength, ultraviolet 222, or UV 222 light, and they found it can effectively neutralize common allergen proteins.
Like what kind of allergens?
Things like cat dander, dust mites, mold spores, the stuff that makes so many people miserable, and it does it relatively quickly within about 30 minutes of exposure.
30 minutes, just using light to basically switch off the things that trigger allergies. That sounds amazing.
It really is promising. The key is that this UV 222 wavelength, unlike the harsher UVC light often used for germ killing, seems to be much safer for human skin and eyes based on current research.
Okay, so it's safe for us, but bad for the allergens.
Exactly. It disrupts the molecular structure of the allergen proteins themselves, renders them harmless to our immune system. So it's a non-invasive approach. You could imagine portable UV 222 devices, maybe built into air purifiers, or even small personal devices for people with severe allergies.
Offering relief without drugs. That could genuinely transform quality of life for a huge number of people.
A massive potential impact.
All right, moving from external factors to internal health, let's talk about the brain. Harvard research linked the green Mediterranean diet to slowing brain aging. What's specific about the green part?
It's about emphasizing certain foods packed with anti-inflammatory compounds. Specifically, this diet highlights things like green tea and mankai, which is a type of nutrient-rich duckweed, believe it or not.
Duckweed. Yeah.
But the point is, these foods are loaded with polyphenols and other compounds that fight inflammation. The study found people on this diet had significantly lower levels of certain proteins linked to cognitive decline and brain aging.
So the takeaway is pretty clear. What you eat directly impacts brain health long-term, right down to the molecular level.
Absolutely. Anti-inflammatory eating habits seem to actively protect the brain. It's powerful evidence for nutritional intervention.
That's the good news for the brain. But there's a flip side, a serious threat highlighted by NYU Langone Health, kids' exposure to common plastic chemicals.
This is a really concerning area. It raises big questions about the hidden costs of well, modern life and all the plastic we use. This comprehensive review linked chemicals like phthalates and bisphenol ABPA, which are everywhere.
In food packaging, toys, water bottles.
Right. They function as endocrine disruptors, meaning they interfere with our hormones. And the study connects childhood exposure to these chemicals with some serious long-term health problems.
Like what specifically? What are the risks?
They range from a higher risk of obesity and asthma to potentially impaired brain development. And because they mess with hormones, there are concerns about effects on puberty, maybe even fertility later in life.
And kids are especially vulnerable.
That's the major concern. During critical developmental windows, their systems are incredibly sensitive. These chemicals interfere with essential hormonal signals needed for normal growth and development. And given how widespread exposure is, we're all consuming microplastics, these chemicals leach into food and water.
It's unavoidable, really.
Pretty much. So this isn't some niche environmental issue. It's looking more like a pervasive public health crisis that really demands regulatory attention.
That link between the environment and our health, especially development, is a perfect way to pivot into Section 2, the race for tomorrow. Because so much of this race is about acquiring resources and building the tech and infrastructure for the future. Let's start with a literal race for resources, China's huge push to dominate critical minerals.
Yeah, China's making a massive strategic play here. They want to control the supply chain for minerals like lithium, cobalt, rare earths, all absolutely essential for the green energy transition. Think electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines.
And the method they're using is, well, the scale is mind-boggling. An electromagnetic antenna 5 times the size of New York City.
It's almost hard to picture, isn't it? This antenna was apparently originally designed for communicating with submarines deep underwater. Now they're repurposing it, or similar tech, for mineral exploration.
How does an antenna that big help find rocks?
They're using something called the wireless electromagnetic method, or WEM, and they're pumping incredible amounts of power through its systems, over 100 kilowatts. This huge power lets the electromagnetic signals penetrate much deeper into the Earth than usual methods.
Overcoming the usual geological noise?
Exactly. It allows them to essentially create 3D maps of underground mineral deposits from the surface much faster and over larger areas than conventional techniques like drilling or standard magnetometry. It gives them a significant edge in identifying new reserves.
That kind of technological advantage puts enormous pressure on everyone else trying to secure these minerals. And it connects directly to the ethical side of this, doesn't it? This rush for minerals.
It absolutely does. The demand is skyrocketing, pushing mining activity, often in places with, let's say, complex environmental and human rights records. Think the Democratic Republic of Congo for cobalt, or parts of South America for lithium.
So how do companies ensure they're not using, unethically sourced materials?
That's where technology is stepping in again, but on a different scale. Companies like Source Certain are using forensic science. They analyze the unique chemical fingerprint, the elemental composition of the minerals.
Like a fingerprint for a batch of lithium.
Precisely. It allows them to trace those minerals back to their exact mine of origin. It's basically chain of custody confirmation at the atomic level.
Which is vital for companies trying to prove their supply chains are clean.
It's becoming essential. There's huge public and regulatory pressure now. Companies need to avoid greenwashing. They need to avoid links to forced labor. This kind of forensic tracking turns a raw commodity into something verifiable with an auditable history.
Sticking with materials and building, there's also innovation happening in construction tech, a new ultrasonic device.
Yes, this is aimed at making construction faster, safer, and more efficient. It uses high-frequency ultrasonic waves, sound waves beyond human hearing, to analyze building materials in real time.
What kind of analysis?
Checking the quality of concrete mixes, assessing the structural integrity of components, detecting hidden flaws or voids early on. It's not just about speed, it's about optimizing material use, reducing waste, and ultimately ensuring the building is structurally sound and aligns with sustainable practices right from the foundation. #B, the future of energy and data.
Okay, let's shift from building materials to the ultimate energy source, nuclear fusion. Huge news here. Commonwealth Fusion Systems, CFS, landed a massive power purchase agreement over $1 billion.
This is a landmark deal, yes, with the Italian energy giant Eni.
Oh.
And it's monumental because it signals both scientific confidence and, maybe more importantly, commercial readiness.
CFS is the MIT spinoff, right, using spark tokamak technology.
That's them. A tokamak is that donut-shaped device using powerful magnets to confine superhot plasma hotter than the sun's core to enable fusion. CFS's innovation, the SMARC design, Uses new high-temperature superconducting magnets.
And those magnets are key because
Because they can create much stronger magnetic fields in a smaller space. This means you can potentially build a much smaller, more compact, and hopefully cheaper fusion power plant compared to older, enormous designs like ITER in France.
so smaller magnets could mean commercially viable fusion power is closer.
That's the hope, and the bet CFS and ENI are making. They're aiming to build the world's first grid-scale fusion power plant, planned for Virginia, aiming for operation in the early 2030s. This power purchase agreement isn't just funding, it actually sets a price for the electricity CFS plans to generate.
It says the market is willing to pay for fusion power.
Exactly. It shifts fusion further from being just a physics experiment towards becoming an engineering and commercial reality. A huge step.
While we're racing towards new energy, we're also grappling with how to manage the digital frontier. The White House put out a big roadmap for artificial intelligence, AI.
Yes, a really comprehensive plan. It's a necessary proactive step, given how quickly AI is weaving itself into, well, everything. The roadmap lays out key goals.
What are the main pillars?
Things like ensuring AI systems are safe and secure, establishing clear accountability who's responsible when an AI makes a mistake, promoting equity, trying to fight algorithmic bias, and importantly, preparing the workforce for the big changes AI is going to bring to jobs.
So trying to encourage innovation but put guardrails in place.
That's the balancing act, fostering the good parts of AI while trying to mitigate the potentially catastrophic risks, from bias to job displacement to even bigger existential concerns down the line.
And speaking of managing massive data, there's a startup called Earthmover that just got $7.2 million in funding. Their goal is to be the Snowflake for geospatial data, Snowflake being the big data warehousing company.
Right. Earthmover is focusing specifically on the complex world of climate and weather data, plus other location-based or geospatial information. They're building cloud-based tools designed for high-performance analysis of this type of data.
And they're using tensor processing. What's special about that?
Tensors are basically mathematical structures that are really good at handling large multi-dimensional data sets. Think about climate data. You've got temperature, pressure, humidity, wind speed, all varying across space and time, maybe layered with satellite imagery.
It's incredibly complex data.
Exactly. Tensor processing allows for much more efficient computation and modeling with these huge, complex spatial data sets compared to traditional databases. This is becoming vital as we need better, faster climate predictions and more detailed environmental analysis for everything from agriculture to infrastructure planning in a changing world. #C, space exploration and cosmic curiosity.
Okay, let's lift our eyes from Earth's data streams and look outwards for a moment. Up on Mars, the Curiosity rover is still going strong, sending back amazing pictures.
Still trucking along. The latest images are stunning, as always, but also scientifically valuable. They're giving us really detailed views of Martian geology, more evidence of ancient riverbeds, sedimentary rocks. It just keeps reinforcing the picture of Mars as a once much wetter, potentially more habitable planet.
Meanwhile, back closer to home, astronauts are getting ready for our return to the moon. NASA's Artemis II crew is in heavy training.
They are. NASA, of course, being the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The Artemis II crew is doing things like moon-watching exercises, which sounds relaxed, but it's actually intensive training.
What does it involve?
Familiarizing themselves with the lunar landscape as seen from Earth orbit, practicing navigation, understanding the trajectory, running through mission maneuvers. This mission is a big deal. It'll take humans further into space than we've been in over 50 years since Apollo. So the prep needs to be rigorous.
Absolutely. Now, for a bit of cosmic curiosity, a poll out of Russia showed a surprisingly high belief in extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, this was quite striking. Nearly 80% of Russians polled said they believe intelligent alien life exists. That's quite a bit higher than similar polls in many Western countries.
80% is huge, but it gets more specific, doesn't it?
It does. Nearly half of those believers, 46% of the total respondents, think that aliens aren't just out there, but they're already observing humanity.
A problem.
Right now.
Observing us. How?
Often through hidden means, sophisticated technology, that kind of idea. It's quite a fascinating perspective on our place in the cosmos.
Well, if they are watching, I wonder what they make of our current global situation. The poll apparently also asked what reading material Russians would recommend for these alien observers.
A light chuckle. Yes, they did. And the top choice, maybe fittingly, was Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace.
War and Peace. For aliens.
I suppose if you want to give extraterrestrials a crash course in human complexity, our history of grand ambitions, devastating conflicts, and intricate social dramas. A 1,200-page epic novel is certainly one way to do it.
A very thorough introduction indeed. Okay. That thought about alien observers brings us crashing back down to Earth and right into Section 3, global geopolitical fragmentation. And the UN stage is currently dominated by some major shifts and tensions. Let's start with the really significant movement around recognizing Palestinian statehood.
This is a major diplomatic shift unfolding. We're seeing a wave, really, of key Western nations changing their long-held stance. Countries like France, the UK, Canada, Australia, Portugal.
They're moving towards formal recognition of a Palestinian state. What's changed? The old position was always that recognition had to come after a peace deal with Israel, right?
Exactly. That was the traditional precondition, especially among EU members and allies. Recognition should be the outcome of a negotiated two-state solution. The shift now seems driven by frustration with the stalled peace process, the ongoing occupation, and the intensifying humanitarian crisis, particularly in Gaza.
And France is really pushing this.
France is taking a leading role. They're planning to formally announce their recognition at a major UN conference focused on the issue, a conference they're co-chairing with Saudi Arabia in New York. They're clearly using that high-profile platform to make a strong statement.
How are Israel and the U.S. responding to this?
Not positively, to say the least. Both Israel and the U.S. are boycotting that UN event. They've called it a circus.
A circus. Strong words.
Very. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the recognition push as absurd, arguing it essentially rewards terrorism and undermines Israel's security. He remains firmly opposed.
And on the ground, Israel is continuing with settlement expansion in the West Bank.
Yes. Despite widespread international condemnation and pressure, settlement construction continues, and in some cases has even accelerated. Israel argues it's necessary for long-term security and reflects demographic realities.
And the UK has issued a specific warning.
The UK has specifically cautioned Israel not to retaliate against the countries recognizing Palestine. Things like recalling ambassadors or imposing economic sanctions. It shows just how high the diplomatic stakes are.
What are Palestinians themselves saying, those in Gaza and the West Bank?
Understandably, while recognition is welcome symbolically, voices on the ground are emphasizing the need for concrete action. They're asking how statehood recognition translates into real change amidst the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and the daily realities of occupation in the West Bank. They want justice and tangible improvements, not just diplomatic gestures.
And adding another layer to the UN dynamics, Syria's president made a historic appearance.
Yes, the arrival of Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara at the UN General Assembly is highly significant. It's the first time a Syrian leader has attended in nearly 60 years.
Wow, 60 years. What does that signal?
It signals Syria's push to break out of its long international isolation, caused by years of brutal civil war and regional instability. They're seeking to reestablish diplomatic ties, attract reconstruction aid, and regain a place on the world stage.
Okay, let's shift focus to the other major conflict dominating headlines, Russia's war in Ukraine. We're now deep into this, day 1306 you noted. The pattern of escalation seems relentless. Mutual accusations of strikes on civilian areas.
Tragically, yes. That remains a constant grim feature. Ukraine reported a recent Russian strike hitting Foros, a resort town in occupied Crimea, killing 3 civilians. Shows nowhere is truly safe.
And Russia claims Ukraine targeted Belgorod.
Russia reported a Ukrainian drone attack near the Belgorod City Council building, injuring 2 people. These tit-for-tat accusations highlight the devastating human cost and the way both sides are hitting targets far behind the main battle lines.
And technologically, Ukraine is adapting to its personnel challenges, using robots on wheels.
Yes, they're increasingly deploying remote-controlled armored vehicles, basically ground drones, for high-risk missions. This is a direct response to troop shortages and the need to reduce casualties in this brutal war of attrition.
What kind of missions can these robots do?
Things like delivering ammunition or supplies to dangerous forward positions, clearing mines, conducting surveillance in contested urban zones. Military commanders are clear they can't fully replace soldiers for complex tasks, but they're invaluable for specific, high-risk jobs, keeping soldiers out of immediate harm's way.
The war is also spilling over, increasing tensions on NATO borders. Estonia reported a major airspace violation.
A serious one. Estonia recorded 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets flew into their airspace and stayed for about 12 minutes. This wasn't just a brief accidental crossing.
12 minutes is deliberate. How did NATO respond?
Estonia immediately requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, something they haven't done in 34 years. NATO scrambled jets, including Italian F-35s, to intercept and escort the Russian planes out. It's seen as a clear Russian provocation, testing NATO's air defenses and reaction times.
And nearby Poland's reaction was very strong.
Extremely firm. Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, stated very clearly that Poland is prepared to shoot down any aircraft that unambiguously violates its airspace. That's stark language, showing how low the tolerance threshold is along NATO's eastern flank right now.
On the diplomatic and financial front, French President Macron warned against seizing frozen Russian assets. About $300 billion, right?
That's the figure, yes. Billions in Russian central bank assets frozen in Western institutions. Macron's warning is specifically about seizing the principal amount. Western nations are already using the interest generated by these assets to help fund Ukraine.
So using the profits is okay, but taking the original capital is not. Why?
Macron argues seizing the principal would violate fundamental principles of international law regarding sovereign assets. He fears it could cause total chaos in global finance, eroding trust in the system where countries hold reserves abroad. It could lead to other countries pulling their funds from Western institutions. It's a very complex legal and financial debate. ##C, U.S. politics and global influence.
Let's touch on U.S. global influence and related domestic politics elsewhere. In Japan, there's still significant opposition to U.S. military bases.
Very much so. A recent poll found 82% of Japanese citizens oppose having U.S. military bases near their homes. This isn't new, but the number is high. The opposition is especially strong in places like Okinawa, which hosts a disproportionate number of the bases.
What are the main complaints?
The same ones that have persisted for decades, really. Concerns about crime rates associated with service members, noise pollution from aircraft, especially training flights, and environmental issues related to base operations. It's that constant friction between strategic alliances and local community impact.
Meanwhile, in Europe, German politics seem quite fragile right now. Chancellor Merkel's approval rating is very low.
Plummeting, actually. Around 62% dissatisfaction. Germans are frustrated with a range of issues. High energy costs, taxes, ongoing debates about immigration policy.
And this is helping the far-right AfD party.
Yes. The alternative for Germany, the AfD, known for its anti-establishment and anti-immigration stance, is seeing its support surge in the polls. This instability in Germany, Europe's largest economy, definitely sends ripples across the EU.
And the EU itself is trying to Le Pen-proof its budget. What does that mean?
Slight chuckle. It means they're trying to finalize their massive long-term budget, about $1.8 trillion, relatively quickly. There's a real concern within Brussels that if Marine Le Pen or her allies win the next French presidential election in 2027, it could throw major EU budget plans and overall cohesion into jeopardy. So they're trying to lock things down beforehand.
Okay, shifting focus now to where corporate power meets politics and media. Section 4. Let's start with the U.S., President Trump, and the corporate world. The TikTok saga continues with a deal involving Oracle.
Yes, the latest chapter is being dubbed Murdoch Talk by some. Oracle Corporation is stepping in to play a major role in securing TikTok's data and operations for U.S. users. The plan includes Oracle managing the data infrastructure and even retraining the app's algorithm specifically for the American market.
Retraining the algorithm? How?
The details are still emerging, but the idea is to address those persistent national security concerns primarily. The fear that user data could flow back to ByteDance, TikTok's Chinese parent company, and potentially the Chinese government. Oracle would act as a sort of technological gatekeeper.
And President Trump is backing this, with some big names involved. Murdoch, Ellison, Dell.
Reports suggest a powerful alliance is behind this arrangement. Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch of News Corp and Fox, Oracle founder Larry Ellison, and Michael Dell of Dell Technologies. It looks like a strategic alignment of media influence, tech infrastructure, and political backing to try and keep TikTok operating in the U.S. while satisfying security demands.
Interesting. Okay, another Trump administration policy causing waves. The H-1B visa fee hike, $100,000.
A massive increase, yes. The H-1B visa is crucial for bringing high-skilled foreign workers, especially in tech, into the U.S. Raising the fee to $100,000 per visa is causing significant disruption, particularly for the Indian IT outsourcing industry and many U.S. tech companies that rely heavily on this talent pool.
The argument against it is that it restricts talent and pushes jobs overseas.
That's the main criticism, that it makes the U.S. less competitive for global talent and could incentivize companies to move R&D or other skilled operations elsewhere.
But not everyone is panicked. HSBC said the cost was manageable.
Right, which was a bit surprising. HSBC, the global bank, suggested they could absorb the cost. This likely reflects their business model. They probably use fewer H-1B visas compared to, say, a Google or an Intel, which hire thousands of engineers on these visas. So the impact varies across different sectors of the economy.
And finally, on this interface of government and information, new Pentagon guidelines for journalists covering the military sound quite restrictive.
They've raised serious alarms among press freedom groups, yes. The Department of Defense is now requiring journalists who want access to military bases, personnel, or certain information to sign a pledge.
A pledge not to do what?
Not to disclose any unauthorized military material. And if they refuse to sign, they risk losing their access credentials immediately.
So the military decides what's authorized. Critics must see this as a form of censorship.
That's exactly the concern. Groups like the National Press Club argue it gives the Pentagon excessive control over the narrative. It potentially prevents independent reporting on sensitive issues if that information hasn't been officially cleared for release. They see it as a direct challenge to the First Amendment and the public's right to know, potentially leading to only government-approved stories getting out. #BCB, free speech and polarization in entertainment.
That issue of controlling information flows right into the next topic. The intense debates around free speech, particularly when it gets tangled up with politics and entertainment. The whole Jimmy Kimmel situation is a prime example.
It really blew up, didn't it? Kimmel was suspended by his network after making comments about the alleged assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The remarks sparked immediate outrage, particularly on the right, with calls for him to be fired for, as they saw it, inciting violence or making light of it.
But then other comedians like John Oliver defended him.
Yes, John Oliver came out very strongly in Kimmel's defense. He framed it explicitly as a free speech issue, arguing that comedians often push boundaries and use hyperbole. He also criticized Disney, which owns Kimmel's network, ABC, suggesting they caved too easily to political pressure.
Oliver warned about a chilling effect.
Right. The fear that if networks start suspending hosts every time a politically charged joke causes controversy, comedians and satirists will self-censor, and important, sometimes uncomfortable, commentary will just disappear.
And this even drew in the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission.
Well, FCC Chairman Brennan Carr weighed in, suggesting that broadcasters have a responsibility to serve the public interest, which some interpreted as hinting the FCC might have a role in regulating this kind of political talk, even on an entertainment show.
Does the FCC actually have that authority over a comedy show's content?
That's a huge legal and constitutional question. Traditionally, the FCC regulates broadcast decency standards and ownership rules, not really the political content of satire or commentary shows, especially on cable. Critics see Carr's comments as potential government overreach, attempting to influence programming based on political viewpoints.
And meanwhile, the figure at the center of the original controversy, Charlie Kirk, his political significance was highlighted after his death.
Yes, at his memorial service, President Trump spoke and praised Kirk, calling him an American hero. It just underscores how figures like Kirk become focal points in this highly polarized landscape, and how events surrounding them can quickly escalate into these national debates about media, speech, and political allegiance. #see New Frontiers in Governance and Democracy. While these debates play out in established democracies, some places are experimenting with really radical new forms of governance. Look at Albania. Chaos in Parliament over the introduction of an AI government minister.
An AI minister, seriously.
Yeah.
What's its portfolio?
Yella, as the AI is called, was introduced by Prime Minister Edi Rama to oversee public procurement. The stated goal was laudable: increase transparency and fight corruption in awarding government contracts, which is often a very opaque and bribe-prone area.
Okay, noble goal. But how did Parliament react to an AI colleague?
Not well. Opposition MPs immediately protested, calling it unconstitutional. They argued an AI can't legally hold a ministerial position, can't swear an oath, can't be held accountable like a human. Things got heated. Lawmakers were reportedly throwing things, waiting copies of the Constitution.
So trying to use tech to fix a political problem, but creating a whole new political crisis.
Pretty much. It highlights this tension, but also maybe a broader trend. You see frustration with traditional politics, especially corruption, leading to calls for radical change, sometimes involving technology. Look at Nepal.
What's happening in Nepal?
A significant youth uprising driven by Generation Z. They're demanding major political reforms, fed up with the status quo. It echoes similar youth-led movements pushing for change we've seen recently in neighboring countries like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. They're using social media and modern tools to organize and demand accountability.
And the need for accountability in basic democratic processes is still a global issue. Arrests in Malawi over election results.
Yes, 8 data entry clerks were arrested, accused of manipulating results in the latest election. This is particularly significant in Malawi because their 2019 presidential election was actually annulled by the courts due to widespread irregularities and evidence of tampering.
So history repeating itself or trying to present it.
It shows the ongoing struggle for electoral integrity there. The fact that arrests were made might suggest a stronger attempt to enforce rules this time, but it also highlights how vulnerable the process remains and the critical need to protect the ballot box.
All right, let's move into our final section, Section 5. This is where we look at some tough social dilemmas, questions about how we as societies define the value of life, dignity, and even economic fairness in this complex world.
Let's start with a really difficult case out of Michigan involving an 11-year-old boy and a school's zero-tolerance policy.
Right, this was the boy who was expelled for having a weapon at school. But the context is crucial, isn't it? He reportedly took a gun from a classmate and disassembled it.
Exactly. According to reports, he did it to prevent a potential shooting. His friend described the action as driven by courage and compassion. Yet, under the school's rigid zero-tolerance policy for weapons, the act of possessing and handling the gun, even to disable it, led to his expulsion.
It's such a stark conflict. A policy designed for safety ends up punishing an act that seems heroic, potentially life-saving.
It perfectly highlights the dilemma. Do you enforce the letter of the law, the strict rule designed to keep weapons out absolutely? Or do you consider the intent, the context, the positive outcome in this specific extreme case? It forces a really tough conversation about policy versus individual judgment and heroism.
Moving from policy to deeply personal ethics, the story of Alex Pandolfo in the UK is incredibly compelling. He chose assisted dying.
Yes, Mr. Pandolfo was 71 and living with Alzheimer's disease. He very deliberately planned and traveled to Switzerland, where assisted dying is legal under specific conditions, to end his life at a time of his choosing.
And he was public about his reasons?
Very much so. He spoke about wanting to maintain dignity and control, to avoid the later stages of dementia where he would lose his cognitive abilities and sense of self. His story became a powerful part of the ongoing debate in the UK and elsewhere about the right to choose, about autonomy at the end of life, and the push for legalizing assisted dying. It really underscores that deep human desire for control over one's final chapter.
On a different note related to end of life, there's a trend involving music, people curating playlists for dying.
It's quite profound, actually. People facing terminal illness are increasingly creating specific music playlists. It's not just about having comforting background music. It's about using songs to actively engage with memory, to reinforce their sense of identity, and to communicate something essential about themselves to loved ones during their final days or hours.
Like leaving behind an audio autobiography.
In a way, yes. Music has that unique power to evoke deep emotions and memories. So these playlists become a very personal, intimate form of communication and connection, a way to share who they were, right up to the end. It's a therapeutic use of music in the face of mortality.
Finally, in this section, a tragic story involving wildlife, caretakers, and regulation. A fatal tiger attack in Oklahoma.
Yes, a caretaker named Ryan Easley was killed by a tiger at a private wildlife preserve in southeastern Oklahoma. What brought extra attention to this tragedy was Easley's connection to Joe Exotic, the infamous figure from the Tiger King documentary series.
That connection definitely brings scrutiny.
It does. And it prompted animal welfare groups, notably PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, to immediately renew their calls for much stricter federal and state regulations on owning big cats and operating these kinds of private wildlife facilities. They argue these incidents highlight the inherent dangers and often inadequate safety standards and oversight at non-accredited zoos or sanctuaries. #B economic disruption and compensation.
Okay, let's turn to economic dilemmas. One huge one right now is the cost versus benefit of these new weight loss drugs like Ozempic and similar medications.
It's a massive debate with huge financial implications. On one hand, these GLP-1 agonist drugs are revolutionary in terms of effectiveness for weight loss and managing type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
But they're incredibly expensive.
Thousands of dollars a month, often.
Right, a huge cost for individuals, insurers, and healthcare systems right now. But the argument for covering them involves looking at the long term.
The idea being they save money down the road.
That's a projection. Significant weight loss dramatically reduces the risk of developing or worsening a whole range of costly chronic conditions linked to obesity, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, kidney disease, certain cancers. The financial models suggest that preventing or managing those conditions over decades could save the healthcare system far more money than the current high cost of the drugs themselves.
So it's an investment now for future savings. But who pays now?
That's the billion-dollar question. Should employers cover it? Insurance companies? Government programs? It's a really contentious debate about short-term costs versus long-term population health benefits and savings.
Then there's the more personal economic tension, like the story of the small business owner, Mike, who cut profit sharing.
Yeah, this sparked quite a discussion. Mike apparently had a tough financial year and decided to cut the usual profit-sharing bonuses for his long-term employees. The employees, understandably, were upset, feeling they were entitled to it based on past practice.
And financial commentator Dave Ramsey had a pretty blunt take.
Very blunt. He sided firmly with the owner, calling the employees entitled little twerps, essentially, arguing they didn't understand the risks and pressures of running a small business, especially when times get tough. He emphasized that profit sharing is dependent on profits, which aren't guaranteed.
It really highlights that classic friction, doesn't it? Employee expectations for fair compensation and rewards versus the fundamental need for a business, especially a small one, to remain sustainable and profitable.
Absolutely. Balancing morale and retention with the bottom line is a constant challenge for business owners.
And just quickly wrapping the economic picture, we saw some market moves reflecting wider anxieties, gold and silver prices up.
Yes, gold hit a record high recently, and silver reached a 14-year high. That's often seen as a classic indicator of economic uncertainty and investor nervousness.
People fleeing to safe haven assets.
Just exactly. When there's geopolitical instability, inflation concerns, or worries about the stability of traditional financial markets or currencies, investors often move money into tangible assets like precious metals, things perceived to hold their value better. It reflects those broader global economic pressures we've been talking about. #TagGetTouchOver.
Well, we have certainly covered a vast landscape today, from the way water molecules behave in tiny spaces and ice generating electricity, all the way to the global stage at the UN with statehood debates and geopolitical maneuvering.
It really underscores the moment we're in, doesn't it? On one hand, this incredible accelerating technological progress. We're talking fusion power on the horizon, sophisticated AI shaping governance, new materials, amazing medical breakthroughs.
Just tremendous potential.
Tremendous. But it's running headlong into these deeply rooted human conflicts. Disputes over land and identity like the Palestinian situation, wars grinding on like in Ukraine, tensions over borders, resources, economic fairness, even fundamental questions about dignity and the value of life.
So, connecting all these threads, here's maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder. We have the science and tech offering potential solutions we could only dream of a generation ago. Clean energy, maybe personalized medicine that extends healthy lifespans.
Real paradigm shifts seem possible.
Yet our political systems, our social structures often seem stuck, mired in conflicts, ideologies, and zero-sum thinking that feel very much like the 20th century or even earlier. So the question is, what gives first? Does the geopolitical gridlock finally break under the pressure and potential of new solutions? Or do the energy and resource barriers fall first, forcing political change?
It's the central tension of our time, perhaps. Something definitely worth thinking about. Until next time, keep digging deeper. Keep synthesizing the context around you.
And stay curious.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.